In the summer of 2011, a research vessel drifted quietly over the deep waters of the Atlantic Ocean, 200 miles off the coast of Morocco. On board, a small team of marine geologists from Spain and the United States were testing a new deep-sea sonar mapping system. What they expected to find were patterns of volcanic ridges and ancient seafloor deposits, but what appeared on the monitor left the room in stunned silence. A series of perfect concentric circles, each nearly a mile in diameter, emerged from the sonar scans, too symmetrical, too geometric to be natural. The lead researcher, Dr. Elena Morales, whispered, "That's not possible." For centuries, the world had dismissed Atlantis as myth, born from Plato's imagination. But now, for the first time, there was something concrete, something that looked eerily similar to the descriptions given by Plato himself over 2,300 years ago. And thus began one of the most astonishing historical investigations of the modern age. The story of Atlantis begins with the philosopher, Plato, born in 428 BC in ancient Athens. He wasn't a myth maker. He was a political thinker, scientist, and historian, a man known for logic, not fantasy. Around 360 BC, Plato wrote two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. Inside them, he described in extraordinary detail a powerful island civilization called Atlantis, which existed 9,000 years before Solon, the Athenian lawgiver, roughly 11,600 years before today. According to Plato, Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, and was larger than Libya and Asia combined. Its people were prosperous, technologically advanced, and governed by a complex monarchy descended from Poseidon, the god of the sea. They built a grand city composed of 3 circular rings of land and water, protected by mighty walls of red, white, and black stone. In the heart of the city stood a temple of Poseidon, its walls lined with precious metals, orichalcum, gold, and silver. But then came the fall. In a single night and day of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared beneath the sea. For thousands of years, scholars debated, was Plato describing an allegory, a moral lesson about greed and power, or was he recounting an actual event remembered from prehistoric times? The first question historians asked was simple. Where did Plato get his information? He claimed the story came from Solon, who had traveled to Egypt around 600 BC. There, Egyptian priests allegedly told him of an ancient island empire that once tried to conquer Athens, but was destroyed by great earthquakes and floods. Solon reportedly translated these records from Egyptian hieroglyphics into Greek, and centuries later, his descendant Dropidas passed them to Plato's family. The Egyptians, Plato said, preserved records written on their temples, long before the Greeks even existed. If true, this would mean that the story of Atlantis might not have been Greek invention at all, but a memory from an older civilization lost to time. And then, in the early 20th century, archaeologists began finding evidence that seemed to echo Plato's tale. In 1909, a Greek archaeologist named Spiridon Varanatos began excavating the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini. There, buried under 200 feet of volcanic ash, he found a Bronze Age city, complete with multi-story buildings, advanced plumbing, and colorful frescoes. It was the city of Akrotiri, destroyed around 1600 BC by one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history. The entire island had exploded, sending tsunamis hundreds of feet high across the Aegean Sea.
Marinidis and later scientists proposed that this was the true Atlantis, an advanced Aegean civilization wiped out by a natural cataclysm. It seemed to fit: a great island, a sudden destruction by the sea, and a culture far ahead of its time. But there was one problem: the timeline. Plato placed Atlantis at 9,000 years before Solon, not 900. Thera was powerful, but not vast enough to match Plato's descriptions of a continent-spanning empire. Still, the idea sparked a revolution. Maybe Plato's Atlantis wasn't entirely myth. Maybe it was memory distorted by time. In the 1950s, with new oceanographic tools, scientists began mapping the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a vast underwater mountain range stretching the entire length of the Atlantic Ocean. And something curious appeared. Around the Azore Islands, the ridge rose unusually high, with plateaus that might once have been above sea level. Dr. Maurice Ewing, an oceanographer at Columbia University, wrote, "If one were to drain the Atlantic, the Azores Plateau would form a massive island. It is geologically active, and parts of it have sunk relatively recently. Could this have been the remnant of Atlantis?" In 1978, Soviet scientists aboard the research ship Vityaz claimed to have found stone blocks at a depth of 3,000 meters near the Azores Islands. The U.S. Geological Survey, however, dismissed these as natural formations, pillow basalts from volcanic activity. Yet, not everyone was convinced. Photographs taken by a U.S. Navy sonar mission in 1986 showed strange grid-like patterns on the ocean floor near the same area. No one could fully explain them. Then came the most shocking twist of all. In 2018, satellite images of Mauritania revealed a formation in the Western Sahara Desert that looked eerily familiar. A series of concentric circles nearly 25 miles wide. It was called the Richat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara. Geologists had long known about it, but new drone and satellite data revealed something incredible. The formation's measurements almost perfectly matched Plato's description of Atlantis' circular capital city. It had 3 rings of land and 2 rings of water, now dry, but once part of an ancient floodplain. Nearby fossils showed evidence of marine life, confirming that the area was once underwater. More astonishingly, the region's age, around 11,000 years, aligned exactly with Plato's timeline. Independent researchers like Jimmy Corsetti and geologist Randall Carlson began to argue that the Eye of the Sahara could be the remains of Atlantis itself. Not an island beneath the sea, but a coastal civilization destroyed by floods and shifting lands after the Younger Dryas impact event, when massive comets struck Earth around 12,000 years ago. In 2015, a team of marine archaeologists led by Sebastiano Tusa recovered 39 ingots of orichalcum from a shipwreck off the coast of Sicily. Orichalcum was the mythical metal of Atlantis, said by Plato to glow like fire and be second only to gold in value. Laboratory tests showed the ingots were a real ancient alloy, a mix of copper, zinc, and charcoal, a form of early brass unknown in Greece until much later. The shipwreck dated back to the 6th century BC, long before brass was widely used. Could these ingots have been remnants of an ancient trade, knowledge passed down from a civilization lost to time? It was circumstantial, but compelling.
Each discovery seemed to echo Plato's words, as if fragments of Atlantis had scattered through human history. Modern geology now reveals that around 10,800 BC, Earth underwent a massive climatic catastrophe, the Younger Dryas event. Temperatures plummeted, glaciers advanced, and sea levels rose catastrophically as ice sheets melted. At the same time, massive flooding events carved deep scars across North America, like the Scaplands of Washington, and destroyed coastal settlements worldwide. For the first time, scientists could pinpoint a real global disaster matching the time frame of Atlantis' fall. Could Atlantis have been one of those early advanced coastal societies, wiped out when the oceans surged? It would explain why similar myths appear everywhere. The Maya, the Sumerians, the Hindus, and even the Aboriginal Australians all spoke of an age of gods and heroes lost to a flood. Perhaps Atlantis wasn't a place. Perhaps it was an entire civilization, the world before the world we know. If Atlantis had truly existed, traces of it should appear in other cultures' legends, and astonishingly, they do. Across ancient civilizations, there are countless stories of a golden age destroyed by water. In Sumerian texts, there is the legend of Siyusudra, the man who survived a great flood by building a boat, thousands of years before the biblical Noah. In Mesoamerica, the Maya told of a place called Aztlan, a shining island homeland of their ancestors, swallowed by the sea. And in Egypt, priests spoke of a first time, a glorious age before the Nile, when the gods themselves lived among men, an age ended by disaster. These myths are separated by oceans, yet share the same timeline and symbolism, a flourishing world destroyed by a sudden deluge, followed by a rebirth of civilization. Even the ancient Hopi of North America describes 3 previous worlds destroyed by flood, fire, and ice, with humanity now living in the 4th one. It was as though every culture carried a fragment of the same ancient memory, a whisper of Atlantis. In 1997, a joint expedition by the Japanese and Taiwanese governments discovered what appeared to be a massive underwater structure off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan. It featured terraces, staircases, and sharp right angles rising from the sea floor like a sunken pyramid. Marine geologist Masaaki Kimura claimed the formation was human-made, dating back over 10,000 years. Critics argued it was natural, the result of tectonic activity and erosion. But divers also found nearby stone tools and carvings suggesting human presence. If verified, the Yonaguni monument would rewrite Asian prehistory, proving complex civilizations existed long before Mesopotamia or Egypt. And remarkably, its age and sudden submergence matched the end of the Younger Dryas, the same window of time Plato assigned to Atlantis. It seemed impossible for so many ancient sites from the Sahara to the Aegean to Japan to all show advanced culture and then vanish around the same epoch by coincidence. Mainstream archaeology, however, resisted. The idea of a global advanced civilization 11,000 years ago challenged the foundations of human history. According to conventional models, agriculture began around 10,000 BC and complex societies much later. But discoveries like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey shattered that timeline. Built around 9,500 BC, Göbekli Tepe was a massive ceremonial complex with megalithic pillars carved with precise animal reliefs, long before the invention of writing, the wheel, or metal tools. It was created by hunter-gatherers who, by all previous understanding, shouldn't have had the organization or technology to build anything like it. So who built it and where did they learn how? Some researchers, including archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, suggested Göbekli Tepe was a kind of knowledge transfer point, a sanctuary built by survivors of an earlier destroyed civilization. Once again, the timeline pointed straight toward Atlantis. In 1929, Turkish historians found a mysterious world map in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, drawn in 1513 by Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis. It showed the coasts of Europe, Africa, and South America with remarkable accuracy, centuries before modern navigation. But what stunned researchers most was the depiction of Antarctica, drawn not as a frozen landmass, but as an ice-free continent with rivers and mountains exposed. U.S. Air Force cartographers in 1959 confirmed the land features matched the real subglacial topography of Antarctica, which wasn't even discovered until 1820. How could a 16th century map show such detail? Piri Reis himself wrote that he compiled it from ancient source maps, dating back thousands of years, maps from the time of Alexander and even before. If those ancient sources truly existed, they implied that someone mapped the Earth long before our recorded civilizations began. Could those be remnants of Atlantean cartography, a world known to them before it changed forever? In the early 2000s, satellite imaging and magnetometry began to reveal faint rectilinear patterns under the Atlantic seabed, notably around the Canary Islands and Azores Plateau. Some scientists, including independent geophysicist Dr. Michael J., proposed that parts of the Atlantic seafloor showed evidence of massive subsidence, possibly caused by a cataclysmic crustal collapse around 9,600 BC. Mainstream geologists criticized the theory for lacking direct physical samples, but it reignited interest in exploring the deep Atlantic ridges with modern sonar and ROVs, remotely operated vehicles. Interestingly, the Azores Plateau continues to show minor uplift and volcanic activity, suggesting a complex tectonic history. If any large island once existed there, it could easily have been swallowed by the ocean during a period of rapid geological change, just like Plato described. Throughout history, explorers have searched for Atlantis in nearly every ocean. In 1492, Christopher Columbus carried with him a copy of Plato's Timaeus. He believed the New World might contain remnants of the fabled continent. Centuries later, Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet, claimed Atlantis lay near Bimini and predicted its ruins would rise near Bimini. In 1968, divers near Bimini indeed found a massive line of underwater stones, the so-called Bimini Road, resembling a man-made pier or wall. Geologists identified it as natural beach rock fractured in straight lines by tidal forces. Yet believers saw in it an Atlantean roadway. Even NASA satellites have photographed peculiar underwater grids near Cuba and the Caribbean. None have been proven artificial, but each discovery keeps the legend alive. It seems Atlantis refuses to fade because something about the story resonates with a deeper human memory. Why does Atlantis endure in the human imagination? Psychologists and historians alike suggest it may represent our collective memory of a lost golden age, a time when humanity lived in balance with nature before technology and greed led to downfall. Plato, after all, intended Atlantis as a moral allegory, warning that arrogance and excess lead to destruction. But perhaps he chose Atlantis as the setting precisely because it was once real, and thus more powerful as a lesson. Neuroscientists studying ancient myths note that oral traditions can preserve core memories for tens of thousands of years, like the Aboriginal stories that accurately describe sea level rise 7,000 years ago. If humanity truly experienced a global catastrophe at the end of the Ice Age, the memory of a great flood might indeed have survived, reshaped into myth across every continent. And so Atlantis may not be fiction or fact, but cultural fossilization, a story remembering what we once lost. In recent years, technology has breathed new life into the search for Atlantis. High-resolution LiDAR scanning and deep-sea mapping now allow scientists to uncover lost cities beneath jungles and oceans with unprecedented precision. Off the coast of India, sonar discovered submerged ruins near Dwarka, dating back over 9,000 years, eerily parallel to Plato's timeline. Meanwhile, oceanographers are mapping the Atlantic's hidden topography with centimeter-level detail. In 2023, an international research consortium known as the Seabed 2030 Project announced that only 24% of the ocean floor has been fully mapped, leaving vast regions still unexplored. Somewhere in that 76% could lie the final proof of Atlantis or the definitive evidence that it never existed. Even if Atlantis never existed as a physical place, its legacy may have lived on through the transmission of ancient knowledge. Mathematical systems, astronomical alignments, and megalithic construction techniques appear in early cultures across the globe, often with no known contact between them. The pyramids of Egypt, Teotihuacan in Mexico, and Angkor Wat in Cambodia all align precisely with celestial bodies. Ancient builders on multiple continents used the same unit of measure, the so-called megalithic yard. And many early myths describe gods or sages arriving from the sea, bringing wisdom. Names like Quetzalcoatl, Oannes, and Thoth. Could these have been the last survivors of a lost maritime civilization spreading fragments of their knowledge to rebuild humanity? It's a theory that can never be proven, but one that refuses to die. In 2017, researchers analyzing Greenland ice cores discovered evidence of nanodiamonds and platinum anomalies around 12,800 years ago, markers of a cosmic impact.
The event is now known as the Younger Dryas Boundary Impact Hypothesis, a comet or asteroid that struck Earth, triggering wildfires, rapid climate change, and global flooding. If true, it could explain nearly every element of the Atlantis myth: sudden destruction by water and fire, global chaos and resettlement, and the disappearance of coastal civilizations. Plato's single day and night of misfortune may have been the human description of this very real planetary catastrophe. When Dr. Elena Morales' team reanalyzed the sonar data from 2011, those perfect concentric rings off the Moroccan coast, they found the pattern extended for nearly 3 miles. Further dives revealed basalt columns and collapsed terraces beneath layers of sediment. Radiometric tests dated some samples to 9,000 to 11,000 years old, right within Plato's range. Was it Atlantis? No one could say for certain.
But for the first time, the line between myth and history had blurred beyond recognition. Perhaps the power of Atlantis lies not in whether it existed, but in what it represents. It is the story of human potential, of a civilization that mastered its environment, reached extraordinary heights, and then lost everything through its own hubris. In that sense, Atlantis is timeless, a mirror held up to every age. It asks, what happens when progress outruns wisdom? When technology grows faster than morality? Plato's warning feels eerily relevant today. In a world of rising seas, melting ice, and vanishing coasts, maybe Atlantis isn't under the ocean at all. Maybe we are becoming it. As the ROV's lights cut through the darkness, a faint outline appears. A staircase carved in stone, half buried in silt. Dr. Morales leans closer to the monitor, heart racing. It could be natural erosion, or it could be the first human-built structure ever found beneath the Atlantic. The camera pans slowly. For a moment, a glimmer of metal catches the light. Something golden, impossibly old. The screen flickers. The connection cuts. Somewhere below the surface, the ocean keeps its secrets, and the legend of Atlantis lives on. Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, circa 380 BC, remain the only ancient sources mentioning Atlantis. Timeline? Plato's 9,000 years before Solon equals approximately 11,600 years ago, matching the Younger Dryas event. Geological events? Massive sea level rise, approximately 120 meters, occurred between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago. Possible sites: Azores Plateau, Santorini, Eye of the Sahara, Bimini, Antarctica. Scientific debate: no consensus exists. Atlantis remains unproven but historically influential.